It was a quiet night in the galaxy. The stars twinkled in the vastness of space, and everything seemed calm. The planet Lyros, part of the galactic empire, was peacefully orbiting its sun. But in the shadows of deep space, something far more dangerous was waiting. For months, a strange anomaly had appeared on the edge of the sector, an unknown object, massive and silent, moving at speeds no ship should be able to reach. The galaxy had ignored it at first. After all, who would think that humans could be the cause of such a mysterious, threatening presence? Humans were considered weak by most of the galaxy's inhabitants. Their weapons were outdated, their technology primitive compared to the vast empires of the stars. But everything changed the moment the Titanus appeared. The first signs came from the Lyros observation station. Lieutenant Dahl, an experienced officer, was working the night shift when the ship appeared on his radar. At first, it was a blip, barely noticeable, like a small asteroid drifting across the system. Eris didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a derelict ship, lost in the vastness of space. But when the object began to approach Lyros at an incredible speed, his thoughts shifted. He ordered his team to focus on the object, sending out automated scans. No response. It was as if the ship had no desire to communicate, no desire to be known. That's when the alarm started. "Lieutenant Dahl, you need to see this," shouted one of the engineers over the communication system. Eris hurried to the observation deck, his heart pounding in his chest. The massive object, which was now clearly a ship, filled the viewports. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was sleek and black, reflecting no light, as if it had absorbed it. The ship was huge, far larger than any warship the galaxy had ever seen. It didn't seem to belong to any known species. Its shape was strange, unlike anything Eris had ever studied. The ship's surface shimmered as if alive, shifting in the depths of space. The crew at Lyra's station was both amazed and terrified. They had never seen anything like it before. The engineers tried to get a closer look, but nothing could penetrate its outer shell, which seemed to block all attempts at scanning it. No one knew where it had come from. No one knew what it wanted. But one thing was clear. It was heading straight for Lyros. "We need to alert the fleet," Eris said, his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread in his stomach. "This could be an attack. Prepare the defenses." The station scrambled, sending out signals to the nearby fleets, but the Titanus was already too close. Within minutes, the ship entered the planet's atmosphere. The ground shook beneath them as the gravitational pull from the ship distorted space and time. Lyro's defense shields activated, but it was clear they were no match for this unknown force. The Titanus continued to move closer, completely unfazed by the planet's defenses. "All stations report," Eris demanded, now fully aware of the magnitude of the situation. The comms crackled with fear. "Lieutenant, the shields are at 25% power. It's like the ship is sucking the energy from them," one of the officers replied, his voice shaky. "It's draining our power. We need to fall back," shouted another voice. "Get the fleet here now." But it was already too late. The Titanus made its move. From the darkness of space, it unleashed a pulse of energy so powerful that the entire planet trembled. It wasn't like any weapon they had ever seen. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't a missile. It was as if the very fabric of space had been bent and twisted. The planet's defenses shattered like glass. The pulse hit the space station first, sending shockwaves through its core. In an instant, the station was silent, its lights blinking out one by one. Outside, the Titanus hovered above the atmosphere, silent, as if waiting for something. Back on Lyros, chaos broke out. People ran through the streets, trying to escape the destruction they couldn't even understand. The pulse had been quick, but it had done its damage. Cities were in flames. Buildings collapsed. The sky itself seemed to ripple with the aftershocks of the weapon. The power grid failed, and entire systems went dark. The people of Lyros, once safe in the comfort of their technological advancements, were now powerless before the unknown ship in their skies. Eris stood in the observation room, unable to take his eyes off the Titanus. It was no longer just a mysterious presence. It was something far worse, an unstoppable force. Whatever it was, it had the power to destroy everything in its path. As the minutes passed, Eris's mind raced. Who could have created such a ship? What was its purpose? The galaxy had underestimated humans for so long. No one had believed that the primitive race of Earth could ever be a threat to the vast empires of space. Yet here they were. The humans had arrived. The Titanus began to slowly descend into the atmosphere, and a voice suddenly boomed over the station's comms. It was loud, clear, and filled with authority. Eris listened, his breath catching in his throat. "This is Captain Jason Riker of the Titanus. To the galaxy's mightiest fleets and empires, I have one message for you. You have underestimated humanity. The time of Earth's silence is over." The comms fell silent, and for the first time, the galaxy trembled. The galaxy had never been so quiet, yet so full of tension. As the Titanus hovered over Lyros, its dark, imposing shape casting a shadow over the planet, the galaxy's most powerful species watched in fear. The sudden arrival of the human warship had sent shockwaves across the vast reaches of space. No one had expected this, and now no one knew what to expect next. Back on Lyros, Lieutenant Aristal was still reeling from the chaos of the previous hours. The city was in ruins, the once thriving metropolis reduced to a smoldering wasteland. People huddled in shelters, terrified and confused, unsure of what was happening to them. The Titanus had shown them its power in one devastating pulse, and the planet was still recovering from the shock. Eris and his team had tried to contact the rest of the galaxy, but the signal was weak and distorted. They couldn't make sense of it. The aliens who had once scoffed at humanity's supposed weakness were now on high alert. They had never seen anything like the Titanus before. For centuries, the various species of the galaxy had looked down on humans, considering them primitive and unimportant. They had no space empire to speak of, no powerful fleets, no advanced technology to rival the might of the established galactic powers. But that perception was about to change, forever. Inside the Titanus, Captain Jason Riker stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the star map. He knew the gravity of the situation. The Titanus was the culmination of everything humanity had worked for, and now it was time to show the galaxy that they had underestimated Earth's potential. "This is just the beginning," Captain Riker muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The Titanus was the perfect weapon, designed for one thing: dominance. It had taken humanity years to build it, but now it was ready to fulfill its purpose. The ship's interior was sleek, with every system designed for efficiency and precision. The crew was small but highly trained, each member selected for their skills and experience. They were the best of what humanity had to offer, and they knew it. No alien fleet, no matter how advanced, could stand up to them. Riker turned to his communications officer, Lieutenant Zora Jensen. "Prepare to send a message to the galaxy. Let them know that we're here." Zora nodded and began to work. The message would be simple: humanity is no longer weak. We have arrived. Meanwhile, the various alien fleets were scrambling. The Titanus had made its presence known, and they were not ready for what came next. The Galactic Federation, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful species, immediately sent a fleet to deal with the threat. The Federation had vast fleets of ships, advanced weaponry, and resources that stretched across dozens of star systems. They had crushed countless rebellions in the past, wiped out entire civilizations that had dared to resist their rule. The Federation was used to dealing with inferior species. But the Federation had never encountered humanity. The Federation's fleet arrived in the Lyros system with impressive speed, hundreds of ships, including some of their most formidable warships. They were led by Grand Admiral Sakaar, a towering figure from the planet Sira, known for his military genius and unshakable confidence. When he received the news of the human ship, he thought it was a mistake. No species, especially humans, could have a warship that powerful. They must have stolen it, or perhaps it was some kind of trap. But when the Titanus powered up its weapons, Sukhar's confidence began to waver. The massive warship's weapons were unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. The ship fired a single pulse, and in an instant, the first few ships of the Federation fleet were obliterated. The pulse was so powerful that it ripped through their shields like paper, turning them into burning husks in a matter of seconds. Sukhar watched in disbelief as his fleet began to crumble before his eyes. The Titanus's weapon didn't just destroy, it annihilated. Every blast was precision-targeted, every move calculated. The Federation ships tried to return fire, but their weapons had no effect. The Titanus absorbed their energy, using it to power its own systems. It was an unstoppable force, and the Federation had no answer to it. Admiral Sukhar, his communications officer, called. The human ship is requesting a communication. They say it's urgent. Sukhar was seething with anger, but there was no denying the truth. The humans had proven themselves a real threat. Put them through, he growled. The image of Captain Riker appeared on the screen, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos outside. This is Captain Jason Riker of the Titanus. To the Galactic Federation, you were warned. Humanity is not your enemy. But if you insist on making us one, we will show you just how strong we are. Sukhar's face twisted with fury. You think you can stand against us? We are the Federation. We control this galaxy. You will bow before us. Riker's eyes were cold. We are the last thing you'll ever underestimate again. I suggest you leave this sector. Now, or we will make you regret it. Sukhar's fists clenched. The Titanus was far stronger than any of their ships, but the Federation had one thing that humans didn't: numbers. He couldn't retreat. Not now. He had to respond, to make the humans understand that they could not simply waltz into the galaxy and expect to take control. You have no idea what you're up against, Sukhar sneered. We'll crush you. Riker didn't flinch. We'll see about that, he replied calmly, and the communication cut off. Within moments, the Federation ships regrouped and launched their full offensive. Hundreds of ships, with their weapons primed, charged toward the Titanus. They fired everything they had. Every weapon in their arsenal aimed directly at the human warship. But Riker knew they would fail. He had studied the Federation's tactics, their weaknesses, their strengths. The Titanus was designed to counter everything they had. The humans had not come to the galaxy to survive. They had come to conquer. The Titanus powered up once again, and this time, instead of a pulse, it fired a devastating beam of concentrated energy. It tore through the Federation fleet like a hot knife through butter. Ships exploded in fiery balls of destruction, their wreckage floating in the cold emptiness of space. The Federation's forces were falling apart, unable to respond to the sheer destructive power of the human ship. Riker's crew watched in silence as the battle raged on. They had expected this, expected to fight for their survival. But now, it was clear. The Titanus was not just a weapon. It was a symbol, a declaration to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The galaxy was theirs for the taking, and nothing could stand in their way. In the aftermath of the Federation's crushing defeat, the galaxy was thrown into turmoil. The Titanus's relentless power had shattered the Federation's elite fleet with terrifying ease. The aftermath of the battle left the Lyros system in ruins, the once proud planet now little more than a barren wasteland. News of humanity's terrifying strength spread like wildfire, igniting fear, confusion, and rage across the galaxy. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. How could humans, who had once been dismissed as insignificant, wield such destruction? The Federation, now reeling from the loss of its fleet, had no choice but to regroup. For the first time in centuries, they faced a genuine existential threat. Their military leadership was in disarray. Grand Admiral Sukhar, humiliated and filled with fury, had retreated to the Federation's homeworld, a cold, dark planet in the heart of the galaxy. There, he gathered the most powerful minds in the Federation's military, plotting their next move. The Federation's Senate was in a state of crisis. Representatives from various star systems and species argued and debated fiercely in an emergency session. The images of the Titanus's overwhelming power had left no one untouched. Species that had once dominated the galaxy now found themselves scrambling for answers, wondering how they could have overlooked such a threat. Some called for diplomacy, others for immediate retaliation. The idea of negotiating with the humans, however, seemed to many like a futile and shameful gesture. The humans had shown their might, and the galaxy's pride had been wounded. The Federation had to respond, and swiftly. Far beyond the corridors of power, though, in the quieter corners of space, another force was watching with equal interest. The Orkan, a race of technologically advanced, yet deeply spiritual beings, had been observing the humans for some time. They had seen the Titanus's destruction from the safety of their distant star systems, and they knew that the humans had something the galaxy had overlooked: determination. The Orkan had studied humanity for centuries, fascinated by their ability to rise above every challenge they faced. While other species crumbled under the weight of adversity, humans always found a way to fight back. The Orkan, having watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, believed that humanity was different. They saw the Titanus not just as a weapon, but as the beginning of something much larger. And they decided it was time to meet the humans, to find out if they truly were the threat the galaxy feared, or something much greater, a force that could change the galaxy forever. The Orkan representatives approached Captain Jason Riker with a proposal, one that was unlike any they had made to other civilizations. They sought an alliance, not through force or coercion, but through mutual respect. It was an offer that could either be humanity's greatest opportunity or its most dangerous mistake. Captain Riker, however, was not interested in alliances. He had witnessed the galaxy's indifference to humanity for far too long. The Titanus had been humanity's answer to that indifference, but now, as the Federation and other powers scrambled to respond, Riker knew that the humans needed something more. They needed power, but they also needed respect, and that could only be earned through dominance. "We didn't come here to beg for alliances," Riker said, his voice steady. "We came to take our place among the stars. If the Orkan want peace, they will have it. But if they stand in our way, they will fall just like the Federation." The message was clear. Humanity would not beg for anything. They had already proven their strength. Now it was time to build something new, a new order in the galaxy, with humans at the top. The Orkan, though peaceful by nature, understood the message. They had seen civilizations like this before, ambitious, driven, and eager to prove themselves. They knew humanity would not stop until they had claimed their place in the stars. So they reluctantly withdrew, offering their advice but never pressuring the humans. They would watch from the shadows, waiting to see how the situation unfolded. Meanwhile, the Federation was preparing for its second assault. The galaxy's most powerful fleets were gathering at the edge of the Lyra system, ready to strike back at the humans. They had learned from their mistakes. This time, they would not underestimate the Titanus. They would come prepared with all their might. Grand Admiral Sekar had spent the weeks after the initial defeat planning, working with the best scientists and military minds in the galaxy. They had analyzed the Titanus's capabilities and weaknesses. It was clear that humanity had a powerful weapon, but they were not invincible. The Federation's new strategy was simple: overwhelming force. They would come at the Titanus from every angle, with every weapon they had. They would keep the human ship distracted, break through its defenses, and take it down piece by piece. The Federation fleet arrived in the Lyra system, a massive armada of ships, their weapons glowing and ready for the fight. This time, they had learned from their failure. The fleet approached cautiously, using a sophisticated array of stealth technology to hide their movements from the Titanus' sensors. The attack would come in waves, designed to confuse and overwhelm the human ship. But Captain Riker was ready. He had anticipated the Federation's strategy. The Titanus's weapons powered up, and the ship shifted position, effortlessly evading the first wave of attacks. Its energy shield flared to life, deflecting the Federation's blasts with ease. The human ship's weapons unleashed a devastating barrage, taking down a dozen Federation ships in seconds. Sakhar's fleet was caught off guard. They had expected the Titanus to be a formidable opponent, but they had underestimated the sheer firepower and agility of the human ship. They quickly realized that their plan was falling apart. As their ships scattered in every direction, the Titanus relentlessly pursued them, its energy pulses cutting through the Federation's vessels like a hot knife through butter. One by one, the Federation ships were destroyed, their advanced technology proving useless against the might of the Titanus. The Federation had once been the most powerful force in the galaxy, but in a matter of hours, it had been reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Sakhar, realizing that the battle was lost, gave the order to retreat. The Federation fleet scattered, their pride shattered along with their ships. The humans had won once again. As the dust settled, Captain Riker stood on the bridge of the Titanus, watching the remnants of the Federation fleet retreat. The message had been sent loud and clear. Humanity had arrived, and they would not be ignored. In the aftermath of the Federation's catastrophic defeat, the galaxy's power dynamics began to shift. The once mighty Galactic Federation, which had ruled with an iron fist, was now a shadow of its former self. Their fleets lay scattered and broken, their leadership humiliated. The Titanus, a symbol of humanity's unexpected strength, had proven that Earth was no longer a planet to be dismissed. In the cold vastness of space, the Titanus was no longer just a ship. It was the harbinger of a new age. Back on Earth, humanity watched in stunned silence as the news of their victory spread across the stars. The Titanus had crushed the Federation's most powerful fleets, and now it was the galaxy's turn to react. Leaders from every corner of the galaxy were in turmoil. The humans, once relegated to the fringes of the galaxy, had proven themselves a force to be reckoned with. No longer would they be ignored. Captain Jason Riker sat in the command center of the Titanus, his mind spinning with the implications of their victory. The battle with the Federation had been decisive, but it was only the beginning. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. What he had to decide now was not whether humanity was strong enough to survive, but whether they were strong enough to lead. "I've seen what they're capable of," Riker said to his senior officers, his eyes narrowing. "But we can't stop here. If we do, we'll be just like every other species that thinks it's safe after a victory. We need to push forward. We need to show them we're not just here to survive. We're here to dominate." The room was filled with nods of agreement. The Titanus was humanity's greatest weapon, but it was also their message. Humanity would no longer be a footnote in the galactic story. They were writing their own chapter, one that would eclipse the old powers. But not everyone was as eager to embrace this new reality. While the Federation struggled to recover, other galactic powers began to take notice. The Xenthor Empire, a brutal and technologically advanced species from the far reaches of the galaxy, saw humanity's rise as a direct threat to their dominance. The Xenthor had conquered hundreds of star systems, their empire spanning across vast swaths of the galaxy. They had the firepower, the numbers, and the resources to crush any rebellion. But humanity was different. They had something the Xenthor had never encountered: the will to fight, no matter the odds. Admiral Kulthor, the supreme commander of the Xenthor fleet, looked out across the stars with a deep sense of unease. The Titanus had proven to be an unstoppable force, and its crew were as determined as any species he had ever faced. The Xenthor Empire had built its power on fear and conquest, but now, for the first time in centuries, they found themselves in a position where they could not bully their way to victory. Humanity had shown them that power was not just about numbers or technology. It was about resolve. "We must act now," before they become a real threat. Admiral Kalfer said, turning to his advisors, "Humanity must be crushed, or they will become the galaxy's new rulers." The Zenthor Empire, despite its military might, knew that the Titanus could not be defeated by conventional means. They had seen what the ship could do, and they knew they would need to outsmart the humans, not just overwhelm them with brute force. Kalfer began to make plans for a series of covert operations designed to test humanity's resolve and force them into a vulnerable position. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Riker was preparing for a new phase of humanity's rise. The Titanus had delivered a clear message to the galaxy, but it was not enough. Humanity would need allies, and Riker knew that the Orkan, the peaceful race that had observed humanity's rise, could be the key. They had offered an alliance, but Riker knew they needed more than just one ally. Humanity needed to solidify its position in the galaxy before any other species could challenge them. A summit was called, bringing together the leaders of Earth's space factions. The goal was simple: forge alliances with those who were willing to stand with humanity, and prepare for the inevitable conflict with those who would not. As the leaders gathered in the war room aboard the Titanus, Riker addressed them with calm authority. "We have proven ourselves. The galaxy knows that humanity is not to be underestimated. But now, we need to turn our victory into something more. We need to build a coalition, a united front. Alone, we are powerful. Together, we will be unstoppable." The leaders, a mix of military commanders, diplomats, and scientists, nodded in agreement. They understood the importance of this moment. The rise of humanity was not just a victory for Earth. It was a victory for every species that had ever been oppressed or ignored by the galaxy's great powers. "The Orkan are already on our side," Riker continued, "but we need more. The Zenthor Empire is already preparing to move against us. We must strike first. We must show them that humanity is not just a new force in the galaxy. We are the future." The room fell silent as the gravity of Riker's words sank in. The Titanus had proven humanity's strength, but it was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of what they could accomplish together. The leaders of Earth's space factions knew that they were standing at the dawn of a new era. This was the moment they had to seize. If they waited too long, the galaxy's old powers would rise again, and humanity's chance at dominance would slip away. The next few days were filled with intense diplomacy and military strategy. Riker and his team worked tirelessly to secure alliances with smaller star systems and species, many of whom had suffered under the rule of the Federation and the Zenthor Empire. They found willing allies among the fierce and proud Vorn, a race of warriors who had been driven to the edge of extinction by the Federation's expansion. The Vorn saw humanity as a new hope, a species that had the courage to stand up to the galaxy's tyrants. With the Vorn and Orkan by their side, humanity was poised to take the next step in their rise to power. But Riker knew that the biggest test was yet to come. The Zenthor Empire was a formidable enemy, and if they were not careful, the galaxy's old powers would unite against them. The Titanus had won battles, but it would take more than one ship to win the war. As the Titanus prepared to leave Earth's orbit once again, Riker stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and opportunities alike. Humanity had already shown its strength, but the real challenge was just beginning. Would they be able to maintain their dominance, or would they be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's oldest empires? As the Titanus set its course for the next battlefield, Riker's thoughts were clear. Humanity had proven that it could fight and win, but the galaxy had a long memory. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would never be forgotten again. The galaxy was on the edge of a precipice. Humanity, once considered a weak and primitive species, had shattered the old order and established itself as a new force to be reckoned with. The Titanus, the flagship of Earth's might, had proven humanity's strength beyond any doubt. Yet, the greatest challenge still loomed large: an inevitable confrontation with the Zenthor Empire, one of the most powerful and ruthless forces in the galaxy. Admiral Calthor of the Zenthor Empire, humiliated by the defeat of the Federation, had set his sights on humanity. He could not allow this new player in the galaxy to rise without a fight. For decades, the Zenthor had ruled through fear and domination, subjugating countless star systems and species. They were not used to being challenged, and they would not tolerate it. The first few skirmishes between the Titanus and the Zenthor fleets had been nothing short of devastating. The Titanus had shown its unmatched firepower, but the Zenthor were no fools. They had been preparing for this day since the Federation's defeat. Under Admiral Calthor's leadership, the Zenthor Empire had regrouped, their military forces reinforced with new technologies and battle strategies designed specifically to counter humanity's most powerful weapon. Captain Jason Riker stood at the helm of the Titanus, his hand steady as he gazed at the stars. His mind raced, weighing the consequences of the war that was about to unfold. He had led humanity to victory once, but this time the stakes were higher. The Zenthor Empire was not just another enemy. They were a power on a scale that humanity had never faced before. If they lost, it would mean the end of humanity's rise, and the destruction of everything they had fought for. Riker turned to his officers, who were all in position, ready for the upcoming battle. "We've won battles, but this will be the war that defines us. The Zenthor will test us like no one else ever has. We can't afford to fail." The crew nodded in agreement. They knew what was at stake. Humanity had already proven its strength, but now they had to prove that they were more than just a single victory. They had to prove they could endure the greatest test of all: survival against an empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. The Titanus's sensors suddenly blinked with activity. The Zenthor fleet was on the move. Hundreds of warships, advanced and menacing, were heading toward Earth's defensive lines. This was it. The final confrontation had begun. Riker activated the comms, his voice calm but resolute. "All hands, brace for impact. We are humanity's last hope. Let's show them why they should never have underestimated us." The battle began with a deafening roar. The Zenthor warships, massive and heavily armed, launched their attack in a coordinated wave, their weapons lighting up the void of space. But humanity was ready. The Titanus's engines roared to life as it maneuvered with precision, evading the initial onslaught. The Zenthor's first volley of laser fire and missile strikes was met with the Titanus's powerful shields, which flared with blinding intensity before absorbing the impact. The Titanus countered with a barrage of its own. Energy pulses from its cannons rippled through space, tearing into the Zenthor ships with devastating power. One after another, the enemy vessels exploded in bursts of fire and debris, their shields no match for the sheer might of humanity's most powerful warship. Admiral Calthor watched in growing frustration from the command center of his flagship, the Dominion. The humans were stronger than he had anticipated. Their tactics were unconventional, and their weaponry was more advanced than anything he had seen before. But the Zenthor were not easily defeated. They had endured countless wars and faced enemies that had once seemed invincible. This would be no different. "Prepare the dreadnoughts," Calthor ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "It's time to end this." The Zenthor fleet deployed its most fearsome ships, dreadnoughts capable of devastating entire fleets with a single shot. These massive vessels were equipped with weapons that could tear through the toughest shields and armor, and they were heading straight for the Titanus. Riker saw the incoming threat on his screens. "All hands, target the dreadnoughts. We can't let them get close." The Titanus locked onto the first dreadnought and fired a series of precision shots, each one aimed at the heart of the enemy ship. But the Zenthor dreadnoughts were more resilient than the other ships, their advanced shields holding off the initial barrage. The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the Titanus darting and weaving through space, trying to outmaneuver the superior firepower of the enemy. The Zenthor dreadnoughts closed in, their massive guns charging for the final strike. The Titanus had moments before they could unleash their weapons. Riker knew that this was humanity's moment to prove it was not only capable of victory, but of surviving the impossible. "Prepare the Titanus for the final strike," Riker commanded, his voice unwavering. "This is our chance. We take them down now, or we lose everything." The crew of the Titanus moved in perfect harmony, each officer knowing their role without hesitation. The weapons systems powered up, and the ship's engines roared to life. The Titanus shot forward with unprecedented speed, closing the distance between itself and the dreadnoughts faster than the Zenthor could react. With a final, coordinated salvo, the Titanus unleashed a devastating barrage of energy, striking the lead dreadnought at its weak point. The enemy ship exploded in a flash of blinding light. The Titanus moved quickly, pivoting to face the remaining dreadnoughts, targeting them one by one, and taking them down with brutal precision. Admiral Calthor watched in disbelief as his fleet was decimated. The humans had done the impossible. His flagship, the Dominion, was now the last remaining Zenthor warship, surrounded by the remnants of their fleet. Calthor's mind raced. He had never been outclassed in battle before, and the reality of defeat settled in. "Retreat," Calthor ordered, but it was too late. The Titanus had already locked on to the Dominion, its weapons primed for the final strike. A single shot was all it would take to end the Zenthor Empire's ambition to dominate the galaxy. Riker's voice rang out over the comms, cold and final. "This is the end for you, Calthor. Humanity is here to stay, and we will never bow to anyone again." The Titanus fired, and the Dominion erupted into flames, its core shattered in an instant. The Zenthor Empire, which had ruled with an iron fist for centuries, was no more.